In the summer of 1867, within a remote farming settlement outside Sedalia, Missouri, 8-year-old Timothy Caldwell became the focus of what would later be described as one of the most unsettling medical case studies ever recorded in the American Midwest. Dr. Samuel Harding, the area's sole practicing physician, filled 3 leather-bound journals with meticulous observations of a child whose conduct defied nearly every assumption about human nature known to 19th-century medicine. To casual onlookers, the boy appeared ordinary, even pleasant. Yet beneath that innocent surface existed something that contemporary medical understanding could not define or explain. Over a period of 6 months, 3 individuals died in apparent accidents connected to Timothy Caldwell, along with dozens of farm animals discovered dead under inexplicable circumstances. 11 people, all of whom had crossed paths with a child whose smile never truly reached his pale blue eyes. Official documents were sealed by local authorities and concealed for more than 100 years. But the reality of Timothy Caldwell exposes a darkness that challenges everything we believe about the potential for evil within childhood. Before continuing with the account of Timothy Caldwell and the fear that spread through Sedalia County, if this story captures your interest, be sure to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell so you never miss our explorations into America's darkest historical mysteries. And please tell us in the comments which state or city you're listening from. We enjoy hearing from our community of mystery enthusiasts across the world. The events that would ultimately make Timothy Caldwell notorious did not begin with violence, but with loss. Missouri in 1867 was still hemorrhaging from the scars of the Civil War. Towns like Sedalia had sent their young men to die on distant battlefields, leaving behind widows, fatherless children, and fractured communities attempting to rebuild. The Caldwell farm, tucked into a valley 15 miles south of town, had once thrived. James and Martha Caldwell had established their homestead with hopes of raising cattle and corn, but those hopes were buried with James after he fell at the Battle of Wilson's Creek in 1861. Martha struggled to keep the farm afloat alone, but consumption claimed her lungs during the harsh winter of 1865. Their son Thomas, barely 21 years old, inherited land he could not manage and debts he could not repay. When word arrived that his brother William had died at Andersonville Prison, leaving behind a widow and an 8-year-old son, Thomas saw both obligation and opportunity. The boy Timothy needed a place to live, and Thomas needed help with the relentless labor of farming. Thomas Caldwell was a stern man, hardened further by war and grief. His wife Sarah had grown sharp-tongued and resentful during their years without children. Neither was well equipped to raise a child, particularly one who arrived at their door in the spring of 1866, carrying only a small cloth bag and eyes that seemed far too old for his young face. Timothy Caldwell was undersized for his age, his pale skin quick to burn beneath the Missouri sun, his blonde hair kept cropped short by Aunt Sarah to ward off lice. He spoke little about his past, offering only fragments when questioned. His father had been a soldier. His mother had coughed blood. After her death, he had stayed with neighbors for a time. What struck most adults about Timothy was his impeccable politeness. He always replied with "yes, sir," and "yes, ma'am." He never protested work or discipline. In every visible way, he appeared to be the ideal, well-mannered child. Dr. Samuel Harding first met Timothy in June of 1866, when the boy accompanied his uncle into town for supplies. Harding, a graduate of the Missouri Medical College and one of the few formally trained physicians west of St. Louis, had developed a sharp instinct for reading people during his years treating both Union and Confederate soldiers. Something about the Caldwell boy unsettled him, though he could not immediately identify why. The child was flawlessly respectful, Harding later recorded in his journal. He answered questions plainly, maintained steady eye contact, and showed none of the nervous movement or shyness typical of rural children meeting strangers. Yet Harding found himself profoundly uneasy in the boy's presence. Timothy's gaze carried an intensity that suggested he was studying the doctor with the same clinical curiosity Harding usually reserved for his patients. The farming community around Sedalia was small enough that everyone knew one another's affairs. The Caldwell farm was isolated but not so remote that neighbors failed to notice unusual details. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, whose land bordered the Caldwell property, often observed Timothy working in the fields or caring for livestock. She commented to her husband that the boy labored with an uncommon focus for someone his age, never appearing tired, never stopping to play or rest as children naturally do. It was like watching a little machine, she told Samuel over supper one evening. He worked steadily from sunrise to sunset, never complaining, never slowing. Ain't natural for a boy to have no play in him at all. The Patterson farm kept chickens, and Eleanor noticed her birds grew restless whenever Timothy approached the fence line. They would bunch together, squawking and ruffling their feathers, refusing to come near the boundary separating the properties. Her husband dismissed it as coincidence, but Eleanor could not shake the feeling that the animals sensed something about the boy that people overlooked. The first death occurred on a sweltering afternoon in August of 1866. 5-year-old Mary Fletcher, the blacksmith's daughter, was known throughout the community for her bright laughter and habit of wandering. She'd been playing near Willow Creek, a shallow stream running through several properties, including the Caldwell farm. Timothy discovered her body. He arrived at the Fletcher home as the family prepared for supper, his clothes damp and his face pale with what seemed genuine distress. "Mrs. Fletcher," he said calmly despite visible agitation, "I found Mary by the creek. She's not breathing." The search party that rushed to the creek found Mary face down in water barely 18 inches deep. Dr. Harding, summoned immediately, ruled the death a drowning, tragic but not uncommon in rural areas where children often played unsupervised near water. What troubled Harding was not the death itself, but Timothy's account of the discovery. The boy offered an unusually detailed description of where Mary lay, the position of her body and the condition of her clothing. When questioned about why he was there at that exact time, Timothy explained he had been searching for a missing calf. His recollection was astonishingly precise. Harding noted that Timothy described the placement of the child's limbs, the way her dress snagged on a submerged branch, even the color of the water around her face. Such detail seemed excessive for a child claiming fear and shock. Thomas Caldwell confirmed that a calf had gone missing that morning and that Timothy had been sent to search near the creek. The animal was found 2 days later, alive and grazing nearly a mile from where Mary Fletcher drowned. The Fletcher family, devastated, received Timothy's sympathy with gratitude. He had found their daughter and alerted them without delay. At the funeral, Timothy sat quietly beside his aunt and uncle, his head bowed throughout the service. When thanked for his quick action, he accepted their words with proper solemnity. "I wish I could have found her sooner," he told Mary's father, his voice carrying the appropriate weight of regret. But Eleanor Patterson, watching from across the church, noticed something that troubled her for days afterward. When Mary's mother collapsed in grief and grown men wept at the sight of the small coffin, Timothy's expression never shifted. His head remained bowed, but when he thought no one watched, his pale blue eyes stayed dry and observant, absorbing every detail around him. The second death followed 3 weeks later. Old Henrik Larsson, a Norwegian immigrant and former logger forced into retirement by arthritis, was found at the base of a rocky outcrop known as Devil's Bluff. The bluff overlooked the same creek where Mary Fletcher had drowned, and Henrik regularly climbed it to check his wild beehives. Once again, Timothy Caldwell was connected to the discovery. Walking home from town, he claimed to have noticed something strange near the bluff. "I saw Mr. Larsson's hat caught in a thorn bush," Timothy told the crowd. "I called out, but he didn't answer, so I climbed down to look." Henrik Larsson lay dead below, his neck broken from what appeared to be a fall from the 40-foot height. Dr. Harding concluded the man likely died instantly on impact. The only unusual feature was the presence of several dead bees scattered around the body, far more than expected away from a hive. Samuel Patterson remarked that Henrik knew those bluffs better than anyone and had climbed them for years without incident. It didn't make sense he'd fall now. When questioned, Timothy suggested the bees might have swarmed the old man, causing him to lose his footing. He was always saying how angry they get when disturbed, Timothy said. Maybe they attacked and he got confused. Harding found the explanation plausible, yet something nagged at him. The dead bees were clustered tightly around the body. If Henrik had disturbed a hive at the top, there should have been evidence of bee activity along his path. Instead, the bees seemed concentrated only at the impact site. When Harding examined the hives, he found them intact and calm, showing no sign of disturbance. The third death shattered any remaining sense of coincidence. In September of 1866, 6-year-old Jacob Mills disappeared while playing in the woods near his family's cabin. His body was found 4 days later in an abandoned well nearly half a mile from where he was last seen. Timothy Caldwell volunteered to join the search. For 3 days, he worked alongside adults with remarkable endurance, navigating the woods as if he knew them intimately. He guided searchers through areas even longtime residents struggled to traverse. Asked how he knew the land so well, Timothy said he often explored during his free time, gathering plants and herbs for his aunt's cooking and remedies. On the 4th morning, Timothy arrived at the Mills cabin just after dawn. "I think I found something," he told Jacob's father, his voice heavy with fatigue. "There's an old well about half a mile north." I heard crying. The well was partially hidden beneath fallen logs and dense brush. Jacob Mills lay at the bottom, alive but barely conscious, suffering from dehydration and exposure. Dr. Harding was summoned, but the child died within hours, his body unable to recover. The boy had been in that well nearly 4 days, Harding wrote. Timothy's ability to locate such an obscure site raised troubling questions. Even more disturbing was Timothy's behavior during Jacob's final hours. While the family kept vigil, Timothy sat quietly in a corner appearing to pray. Harding observed him unnoticed and realized the boy was not praying at all. His lips moved, but his eyes were fixed on Jacob with cold intensity, as though cataloging symptoms. When Jacob died, Timothy showed no shock or grief, only something Harding could describe as satisfaction. After the funeral, Harding visited the well. It was expertly concealed, debris arranged with deliberate precision. Logs and branches were placed to camouflage the opening, making it nearly impossible to find unless one knew where to look. Harding suspected Jacob had not fallen accidentally. Someone had put him there and hidden the site until rescue was too late. That night, Harding began keeping detailed notes on Timothy Caldwell. Suspicion alone was not evidence, but Harding feared the boy posed a danger to the community. Timothy appeared flawless on the surface, attending church, working tirelessly, speaking respectfully, and always having a reasonable explanation for his presence at tragedy. But Harding had seen the same cold detachment in soldiers who killed without remorse. Timothy displayed those traits compressed into the body of a child. Harding's investigation intensified in October of 1866 as he quietly gathered information. Livestock on nearby farms began dying in ways that looked accidental but were disturbingly precise. Chickens were found with cleanly broken necks. Pigs suffered wounds that became fatal. Horses developed sudden lameness. Eleanor Patterson reported losing 17 chickens, all killed neatly, without signs of predators. Harding's examination revealed deliberate force applied with anatomical knowledge. Other farmers told similar stories, often noting Timothy's presence nearby. Harding also noticed Timothy's fascination during medical visits, asking pointed questions about death and injury with unsettling detachment. The curiosity went beyond innocence. It was clinical, methodical, and deeply disturbing, hinting at something far darker beneath the polite exterior. Hearing accounts of battlefield injuries, Timothy listened with rapt attention, asking precise questions about wound patterns, blood loss, and chances of survival. "Did they scream much when you cut off their arms?" Timothy asked during one such discussion, his pale blue eyes locked intensely on Dr. Harding's face. Or were they too badly hurt to make any sound? The question, delivered in Timothy's usual polite tone, sent a chill through Dr. Harding that stayed with him for the rest of his life. By November 1866, Dr. Harding had filled nearly 2 full journals with observations on Timothy Caldwell. What emerged was the portrait of a child possessing an adult's comprehension of violence and death, paired with a complete absence of normal human empathy. Yet written observations were not proof, and proof was exactly what Harding would need if he hoped to protect the community from what he increasingly believed was a dangerous predator. That opportunity arrived when Thomas Caldwell injured his back during the fall harvest. The injury required bed rest and daily medical visits, giving Dr. Harding unprecedented access to the Caldwell household. During these visits, Harding deliberately engaged Timothy in longer conversations, carefully probing the limits of the boy's knowledge and the nature of his thoughts. What he uncovered exceeded even his darkest fears. Timothy Caldwell had been conducting experiments on living creatures for months, possibly years. Through careful questioning and quiet observation, Harding determined that the boy had been systematically capturing and torturing small animals, closely studying their reactions to pain, injury, and distress. And Timothy mentioned a cave during one of their conversations, describing it as a place where he went to think and be alone. When Dr. Harding investigated the site, he discovered a meticulously organized collection of animal bones, crude surgical tools fashioned from farm implements, and a series of detailed drawings documenting experiments in torture and mutilation. The drawings were the most horrifying find of all. Created with surprising artistic skill for a child, they depicted rabbits, squirrels, birds, and larger animals in various stages of dissection and injury. Each illustration was accompanied by notes written in Timothy's neat handwriting, describing the animals' reactions, the length of time it took them to die, and observations about which methods produced the greatest suffering. Subject remained conscious approximately 10 minutes after removal of eyes. Read one note beside a detailed drawing of a rabbit. Vocalizations decreased gradually. Movement ceased after pressure applied to throat. Dr. Harding realized that Timothy had been using the community's animals as subjects in increasingly advanced experiments in cruelty. The so-called accidental deaths on nearby farms were not accidents at all, but the result of Timothy's desire to test his methods on larger living beings. The most chilling discovery, however, was a newer set of drawings that showed human figures instead of animals. These sketches depicted children and adults in poses of distress and injury, each accompanied by speculative notes about human anatomy and possible methods of inflicting harm. One drawing unmistakably represented Mary Fletcher, another showed Henrik Larsen, a third depicted Jacob Mills at the bottom of a well, complete with annotations describing dehydration and exposure in the human body. Timothy Caldwell had not merely been present when these people died. He had planned their deaths, carried them out with methodical precision, and documented the results for future study. And as Dr. Harding would soon learn, the horror gripping Sedalia County was far from finished. Dr. Harding now faced an impossible dilemma. The evidence found in the cave proved Timothy's responsibility for multiple deaths, but it had been obtained through what amounted to an illegal search. Worse still, the notion that an 8-year-old child could be a calculating murderer lay completely outside the accepted understanding of human nature at the time. Medical science in 1867 had no concept of psychopathy or antisocial personality disorder. Children were believed to be inherently innocent, shaped only by poor influences or traumatic experiences. The idea that a child could be born without empathy or moral understanding was simply inconceivable. Harding knew that if he brought his findings to local authorities, he would likely be dismissed as a man whose mind had been damaged by years of treating war injuries. The evidence would be explained away. Timothy would be defended as a grieving orphan, and the killings would continue. Instead, Dr. Harding chose to confront Timothy directly. On his next visit to the Caldwell farm, Harding asked Timothy to walk with him to check the livestock in the far pasture. Once they were alone, he told the boy exactly what he had found in the cave. Timothy's reaction was not what Harding expected. There was no surprise, no denial, no fear. Instead, the boy listened calmly as Harding described the drawings and notes, occasionally nodding as though confirming the accuracy of the doctor's conclusions. "You're not going to tell anyone," Timothy said when Harding finished. It was not a question, but a statement delivered with absolute certainty. "Why wouldn't I?" Harding asked, genuinely curious. Timothy smiled, the first truly genuine expression Harding had ever seen on his face. "Because no one would believe you," he replied, "and because you're curious about what I'll do next." Timothy was correct on both counts. Harding knew his claims would sound like madness. Yet the boy had also identified something Harding was reluctant to admit, even to himself: a scientific fascination with observing the development of what might be the most dangerous human being he had ever encountered. "How long have you been doing this?" Harding asked. "Since I was 5, Timothy replied matter-of-factly. "Maybe earlier. I started with insects, then mice, then bigger things. It's interesting how different animals react to the same treatments. And the people who died." Timothy shrugged. "They were experiments too. I wanted to see if people reacted the same way animals do. Mostly they do, but people understand what's happening. That makes it more interesting." A cold crept through Dr. Harding that had nothing to do with the November air. "What are you planning to do next?" Timothy considered carefully. "I need to see what happens when you hurt someone who trusts you completely, someone who wouldn't suspect anything until it's too late." The meaning was unmistakable. Timothy intended to kill his aunt and uncle. Harding knew he had days at most, perhaps only hours, before the boy acted. Timothy spoke with the confidence of someone who believed himself untouchable, and past behavior suggested he never delayed once a decision was made. That evening, Dr. Harding went to Sheriff William Crawford in Sedalia. Crawford was a practical man, a Union Army veteran with little patience for speculation, but he trusted Harding's judgment. Harding presented only verifiable facts: the drawings, the patterns of deaths, the boy's anatomical knowledge, and most importantly, Timothy's stated intention to kill his relatives. That alone could not be ignored. "Even if half of this is true," Crawford said after studying the drawings with growing alarm, "we can't arrest a child on suspicion alone, but we can watch him and we can be ready." They devised a plan involving Crawford's most trusted deputies. Harding would visit the farm as usual, bringing laudanum under the pretense of pain management, while Crawford's men positioned themselves around the property. The plan went into motion the next morning. As Harding approached the farmhouse, the usual sounds of farm life were absent. An unnatural silence hung over the property. Timothy appeared in the doorway before Harding even dismounted. His sleeves were rolled up, his hands scrubbed clean, the unmistakable signs of preparation. "Good morning, Dr. Harding," Timothy said politely. "I've been waiting for you." Inside, Thomas and Sarah Caldwell lay unconscious in their bed, breathing shallowly. Harding immediately knew this was no natural sleep. "What did you give them?" Harding asked quietly. "Just herbs," Timothy replied innocently. "There are many interesting plants in the woods. Some have very useful properties." Harding confirmed they were alive but deeply sedated. Timothy wanted them helpless, not dead. "Not yet. They're not waking up for hours," Timothy said calmly. "That gives us time to talk." What followed was unlike anything Harding had ever experienced. Timothy described his murders with the detached precision of a professor lecturing on anatomy. He explained his methods, his calculations, and his observations without emotion. "Mary Fletcher taught me drowning is slow," Timothy said. "People panic, they fight. I had to hold her down nearly 3 minutes. Henrik was harder. I loosened the stones the night before and used the bees to scare him. The fall worked exactly as expected. Jacob was the best experiment. I wanted to see slow death. I brought him water each day. Just enough." Harding realized Timothy was no longer theorizing. His plan was already in motion. "What are you going to do to your aunt and Uncle?" Harding asked. Timothy smiled broadly. "That's where you come in. You know what I am. That makes you the perfect subject." As Timothy gathered rope, knives, and heavy objects, Harding drew his pistol. "Step away from the knives," he ordered. Timothy studied the weapon with interest. 6 bullets, he said. 6 people to protect. When Timothy moved toward Thomas with a rope, Harding intervened. The fight was sudden and brutal. Timothy moved with practiced speed, producing hidden blades. Harding was cut before managing to disarm him. Sheriff Crawford and his deputies burst in moments later, subduing Timothy as Harding checked the unconscious couple. Bound and bloodied, Timothy remained calm. "You can't prove anything," he said. "Maybe not," Crawford replied, "but trying to murder your family is enough." Timothy smiled again. "You won't hang me. Someone will want to study me." Timothy Caldwell was wrong about his fate, but right about one thing. Proving his past crimes would be impossible. When Crawford presented the cave evidence, prosecutors dismissed it as the work of a disturbed child. But the attempted murder could not be denied. 3 officers had witnessed it. Even the most sympathetic could not deny that something deeply unnatural existed within the child they had once believed was harmless. The legal system of 1867 had no real structure for dealing with violent children. Timothy was far too young for adult prosecution, yet considered too dangerous for simple placement in an orphanage or reformatory. The case created unprecedented difficulties for Missouri's justice system, drawing attention from legal scholars and medical experts across the region. After weeks of intense legal debate and consultations with specialists from as far as Boston and Philadelphia, a compromise was finally reached. Timothy would be placed in the custody of the Missouri State Hospital for the Insane in Fulton, where he would be observed and treated by the most advanced alienists available in the area. The decision left no side fully satisfied. Prosecutors wanted Timothy tried as an adult for murder, while defense attorneys insisted that a child so young could not reasonably be held accountable for his actions. Medical professionals were sharply divided between those who believed Timothy could be rehabilitated and those who viewed him as permanently dangerous. Dr. Samuel Harding volunteered to accompany Timothy to the hospital and remained there for 3 months, carefully documenting the boy's behavior and working closely with hospital staff to understand exactly what they were dealing with. The resulting case study became one of the earliest systematic examinations of antisocial behavior in children, although it would not be published until many decades later. Timothy adapted to hospital life with the same calculating intelligence he had displayed on the farm. He quickly learned to imitate appropriate emotions and responses, persuading several staff members that he was making extraordinary progress in overcoming his traumatic episodes. Timothy cried convincingly when speaking about his crimes, expressed remorse that appeared sincere, and showed what seemed to be genuine gratitude for the care he received. But Dr. Harding observed that Timothy was simply studying the people around him, learning how to manipulate them more efficiently. The boy had created what amounted to a detailed catalog of human emotional responses, and he could reproduce these signals with remarkable precision despite feeling none of the underlying emotions himself. The subject displays exceptional cognitive abilities combined with a complete absence of authentic emotional response, Dr. Harding wrote in his detailed reports. He has learned to simulate normal human reactions with enough skill to deceive casual observers. However, extended observation reveals the performance to be entirely artificial. Timothy understands happiness as the expression people make when they want something good to continue, and sadness as the expression people make when they want others to assist them. But he has never genuinely experienced either emotion himself. Dr. Harding's evaluation also revealed the depth of Timothy's violent fantasies and future intentions. When the boy believed he had earned Dr. Harding's trust by pretending to be fascinated with the scientific study of human behavior, Timothy began sharing ideas for future experiments that made his past crimes seem restrained by comparison. He developed elaborate scenarios for testing human reactions to various forms of psychological and physical torture. Dr. Harding reported confidentially, "These plans demonstrated remarkable creativity and attention to detail, along with a sophisticated understanding of human psychology. If he were allowed to mature and acquire additional resources, he would likely become one of the most dangerous individuals in American history." Hospital records indicate that Timothy remained at the facility for 18 months. During that time, several unexplained incidents occurred that carried the distinctive hallmarks of Timothy's methods. Other patients were found dead under circumstances that suggested accidents or natural causes, but closer examination revealed patterns of deliberate planning. 3 elderly patients died from apparent heart failure after interacting with Timothy, despite having been in relatively good health beforehand. 2 younger patients suffered what appeared to be accidental falls that resulted in serious injuries, yet both incidents took place in areas where Timothy had been seen earlier that day. Most disturbing were reports from patients who claimed Timothy had been visiting them at night, standing silently beside their beds and watching them sleep. Hospital staff who worked closely with Timothy also began experiencing unusual disturbances. Several nurses reported persistent nightmares after spending time with the boy, dreams that frequently involved vivid scenes of violence and death. 2 attendants requested transfers to other wards, stating that they felt constantly watched, even when Timothy was supposedly confined to his room. Dr. Martha Fitzgerald, who had been brought in to provide additional expertise in Timothy's treatment, discovered that the boy had been keeping a secret journal. Timothy had convinced one of the nurses to supply him with paper and pencil for therapeutic writing exercises, claiming that recording his thoughts and feelings would help him process his emotions more effectively. At first glance, the journal appeared to contain exactly what Timothy had promised: daily entries describing his thoughts, his regrets about past actions, and his hopes for future rehabilitation. The writing was appropriately childlike in tone and emotional content, portraying a deeply troubled but fundamentally redeemable young person struggling to overcome traumatic experiences. However, Dr. Fitzgerald's training in European psychiatric techniques included familiarity with coded communication systems. When she applied analytical methods to Timothy's journal, she discovered that the innocent-seeming entries concealed a sophisticated cipher. Once decoded, the messages revealed Timothy's true thoughts and intentions in chilling detail. Rather than experiencing remorse or genuine rehabilitation, he was conducting a systematic study of the hospital, its staff, and its security measures. His objective was not simply to escape, but to use his confinement to develop more advanced methods of manipulation and murder. Day 47. Dr. F. believes my tears during today's session were authentic, read one decoded entry. Her response pattern indicates increased sympathy and reduced suspicion. Estimate 3 more weeks of consistent performance will be required to establish sufficient trust for physical contact during sessions. The discovery of Timothy's coded journal led to an immediate tightening of security and a reduction in his contact with hospital staff. But Timothy adapted to these changes with characteristic flexibility, shifting his focus from manipulation to gathering information about hospital routines and possible escape routes. In the summer of 1868, Timothy Caldwell disappeared from the Missouri State Hospital under circumstances that were never fully explained. The official investigation concluded that he somehow managed to escape during a transfer between buildings despite being under constant supervision by multiple guards. Dr. Harding suspected that Timothy's escape was far more complex than the official report suggested. The boy had demonstrated extraordinary patience and planning ability throughout his confinement, and it seemed likely that he had spent months preparing for his departure. Evidence discovered after Timothy's disappearance suggested that he had been manipulating staff far more effectively than anyone realized. Several guards admitted to making small policy exceptions for Timothy in the weeks before his escape, allowing slightly longer exercise periods, providing extra reading materials, and making minor adjustments to his routine that individually seemed harmless but collectively may have created opportunities for escape. He spent 1.5 years studying that facility and its personnel, Dr. Harding wrote in his final report. By the time he acted, he understood the psychology of every person who worked there better than they understood themselves. His escape was not an act of desperation. It was the culmination of a carefully executed plan. In the months and years following Timothy's disappearance, Dr. Harding began collecting reports of suspicious deaths and accidents throughout the Midwest. Many of these incidents bore similarities to Timothy's known methods: carefully staged accidents resulting in death, evidence of systematic animal torture, and the presence of a child who appeared unusually helpful and emotionally mature. The troubling reality was that Timothy would now be older, potentially strong enough to overpower adult victims, and certainly sophisticated enough to avoid the mistakes that led to his original capture. His intensive study of human psychology, combined with his natural intelligence and total lack of moral restraint, had produced something unprecedented in American criminal history. Dr. Harding devoted the remaining years of his career to tracking these reports and attempting to form a comprehensive understanding of what Timothy Caldwell represented. His private journals, discovered after his death in 1891, contained hundreds of pages documenting cases that might have involved Timothy, along with theoretical reflections on the nature of evil and the possibility that some individuals may be born without the capacity for moral reasoning. The broader implications of Timothy's case continue to influence debates about criminal justice, child psychology, and mental health treatment for decades after his disappearance. His ability to deceive trained professionals raised unsettling questions about the reliability of psychiatric evaluation. While his manipulative skills highlighted the dangers of assuming all children are inherently innocent and redeemable, the Caldwell farm was abandoned after Thomas and Sarah recovered from their ordeal. Neither could bear to remain in the place where they had unknowingly sheltered a killer for nearly 2 years. The property eventually reverted to the county and was sold to developers in the 1890s, though local residents avoided the area for decades afterward. The cave where Timothy had conducted his experiments was sealed by Sheriff Crawford shortly after the boy's arrest, but its location was never forgotten by those aware of its significance. Local legend claimed the cave was cursed and that animals refused to graze nearby. Dr. Harding's journals were donated to the Missouri Historical Society in 1923 by his daughter, who believed the scientific value of her father's observations outweighed concerns about their disturbing content. The journals remain in the Society's archives, available to researchers who can demonstrate legitimate academic interest in the development of psychological understanding. Thomas and Sarah Caldwell never spoke publicly about their experience with Timothy, but both lived under assumed names for the rest of their lives, apparently fearing that the boy might someday return to finish what he had started. Sarah died in 1889, and Thomas followed in 1894, neither having children of their own. In his final journal entry, written just days before his death in 1891, Dr. Harding reflected on the wider meaning of Timothy's case. "I have spent 24 years trying to understand what Timothy Caldwell represented, and I fear I have reached a deeply troubling conclusion. Timothy was not an anomaly. He was a glimpse of what human beings might become when stripped of the moral and emotional constraints we believe are fundamental to our nature. If he survived into adulthood, then somewhere in America there walks a man who understands human psychology better than any trained professional, who can manipulate people with near supernatural skill, and who views humanity as nothing more than subjects for experimentation. This mystery shows us that evil can wear the face of innocence, and that our assumptions about childhood and human nature may be dangerously naive. The case of Timothy Caldwell forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about moral development and the possibility that some individuals may be born without the capacity for empathy or conscience that we consider essential to humanity. What do you think of this story? Do you believe everything was revealed, or might there be more to Timothy Caldwell's fate than the official records suggest? Leave your comment below and share your thoughts on this disturbing chapter in American history. If you enjoyed this tale and want more horror stories like it, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share it with someone who loves mysteries as dark and complex as this one. Remember, the truth is often more terrifying than fiction, and history holds secrets that continue to challenge our understanding of human nature. See you in the next video. This story leaves us with an unsettling moral that is difficult to ignore. Intelligence without empathy is not wisdom, and curiosity without conscience can become something monstrous. Timothy's case reminds us that understanding human behavior is not the same as mastering it, and that progress in science or psychology means little without moral responsibility. Evil does not always announce itself with rage or violence. Sometimes it hides behind politeness, tears, and learned expressions of remorse. The danger lies not only in what people do, but in what they are capable of becoming when accountability, compassion, and vigilance are absent. The true lesson is not just about one child, but about the fragile line between knowledge and humanity, and how easily that line can disappear when we assume innocence without question.